Hey everyone, welcome to this presentation hosted by the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History. My name is Marisa Gomez and I am the Public Programs Manager at the museum. And it is my delight to put together programs like this one tonight for our community in an effort to fulfill our mission of connecting people with nature and science to inspire stewardship of the natural world. We are going to get started with just a little bit of housekeeping before we get to what y'all came for, if you will bear with me. First off, I want to make sure that we are all able to communicate with each other. So your video and mic are disabled for this webinar, and we are going to be communicating tonight via the chat. So please take a moment to adjust your chat settings by clicking where it says to panelists and changing it to say panelists and attendees. And that way, not only our presenter, Amy, and myself can see what it is that you have to say, but everyone else can too, which just makes it seem like we're all together. It's just nicer that way. So let's practice using the chat by answering this question that I have up here, which is, what was the most recent plant you found that really excited you? I cannot wait to hear your answers. Maybe it'll serve as a little inspiration for me on my next hike. While you're typing, I'll share that for me, it was the Venus thistle, which is I think Cirsium occidentale var venutum. Maybe Amy will correct me, but it wasn't even in bloom. But I was at Mount Eminem and I turned a corner and there were just like dozens of patches of it everywhere, just the leaves. And just the promise of its bloom in a couple of months got me so happy. I smiled and I thought, I know where I'm going to be in a few months. So anyway, yeah, what about you? What's the most recent plant you found that really excited you? And tonight we are going to be talking about plants, rare plants, special plants, but we're also going to be talking about the CZU Lightning Complex, which impacted traditional and unceded territories of several indigenous tribes who I want to acknowledge now. Impacted tribal territories include that of the Awaswas-speaking Sayanta, Yupi, Chitoni, and Ashistaka, and the Ramaytush-speaking Kuroste. And the land from which I am joining you and the land on which the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History resides is the traditional and unceded territory of the Yupi tribe of the Awaswas Nation. And today these lands are stewarded by the Amamutsin tribal band, who are working hard to fulfill their obligation to Creator to care for and steward Mother Earth and all living things through relearning efforts. And the Amamutsin Land Trust and members of the Land Trust are featured here in this image. And just one last thing before we get into what y'all are here for tonight is I do want to share that this program tonight is part of a brand new initiative developed by the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History in partnership with the California Native Plant Society and the Kenneth S. Norris Center for Natural History. And we're really excited to launch this project after really a lot of months of putting it together. And our goal for this initiative is to empower our community, so that's you, into making meaningful observations of our natural world while also deepening understanding of fire ecology in our region through regular lectures and trainings like this. So, Amy Patten tonight focuses on rare plants, but we'll also bring in experts on mushrooms like we did last month with Christian Schwarz, amphibians, birds, invasive plants, you name it. So I hope you will stick with us through this initiative. And by the end of the program, I'll also share future opportunities to be involved. And without further ado, I think it is time to bring in our presenter, Amy. Hello, Amy.
Hello.
Hello. So glad you're here with us. Before I hand it over to you, I'm just going to give a proper introduction of you, if you don't mind. So Amy here manages the Rare Plant Treasure Hunt Project, which is a community science project that documents rare plant populations throughout all of California. But we're lucky that she lives right here in Santa Cruz. And not only is she passionate about protecting the plants and wildlife of the central coast of California, she's also a wildlife biologist and major herp nerd, as I've come to learn. But we're going to be saving the salamanders for another time and focusing on rare plants for today. And Amy, before you take it away, we wanted to poll our audience tonight on some questions, right? So I am going to try something out, y'all, and let's see how this goes. I'm going to launch a poll, and we are curious about where you're coming from. So the first question that we have for you is this one. Hopefully you're seeing it. Amy, are you seeing that?
I am.
Okay, great. So our question is, do you use iNaturalist? Amy, do you use iNaturalist?
I do, yes, all the time.
Yes, exclamation point,
yes.
All the time. Great. Yeah, for me, I've been using it for years now, but it's only been probably this past year that I like it is a regular fixture. Every time I'm outside, I am using iNaturalist. So let's see, let's give you just a couple more seconds to put in your answers, and then I'm going to end the poll so that we can all see. So I'm going to share the results with you. So it looks like we're kind of like across the board. Some people all the time, some people occasionally, some people, yeah, I've used it a few times. Some people have heard of it, but have not yet used it. And a few don't know what it is yet. So, which I'm really excited to see, because we love to indoctrinate people into the usage of iNaturalist. So you'll be hearing more about it today.
Once you observe, you can't stop.
Yeah. Cool. And then I've got another question. Do you live in the CZU burn zone? Yes or no? Amy, do you live in the burn zone?
No, I do not.
Me neither. Okay, so really quickly, just wrap up your answers there. And the reason why we're asking this is because there's a couple of reasons. Well, we're curious about it, but also a lot of the CZU burn zone is not the areas that normally would have public access. They're not open right now. But people who live up in the area, do have access. So it'll be interesting for us to know that. So I'm going to end the poll now, share the results. So the vast majority of you do not live in the burn zone, but a couple of you do. So for those of you who do, this is something you can use in your neighborhoods. And for those of you who don't, we're going to be sharing with you how you can still be involved. So no worries. And then just one last question, which is going to lead us into the topic du jour, which are rare plants. These are some plants that I just kind of came up with. And I have not seen all of these plants. Amy, have you seen all of these plants?
I have.
Okay.
I literally get paid to see rare plants, so I'm kind of cheating.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be a little maybe upset if you hadn't.
Well, we've got about, as we're about to learn, we've got about 2,500 rare plants statewide, and nearly 150 in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So I've not seen all 150, nor have I seen all 2,500 statewide. So I can answer questions about some of them, but I have yet to meet all of them.
Well, that's just more reason to keep getting out there and looking.
Yeah, there's something new to see.
All right, cool. So it looks like a lot of people have seen the Bonnie Dune Manzanita, which is cool. And the Santa Cruz Cypress, not so much of the beard tongue, which I think is probably not surprising, which maybe we'll find out why. And same with the tar plant. And some haven't seen any of them yet, but we're going to change that. Okay, cool. So enough of that, Amy. We're gonna hand it over to you, and I just want to make sure that everyone knows that there will be an opportunity for questions at the end. You may write your questions throughout using the chat or the Q&A function, but we're just going to save them for the end. Anything else you want to share before we let you loose?
I think we're ready to go.
Okay, take it away.
Oh, come on. It worked perfectly when we were practicing.
There we go. Looks good.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. So my name's Amy, and today we're going to be talking about some of my favorite rare plants from the Santa Cruz Mountains and about our new community science project in the CZU Complex Burn Zone. So I work at a nonprofit called California Native Plant Society, or CNPS. We are a statewide organization, and we're dedicated to conserving and protecting our native flora and our very special places all around the state. I focus on rare plants. I'm in our rare plant science department, and we're going to learn all about rare plant science today. So to start off, I'm going to give you some background on some of our very cool plants in California. So as I mentioned, I'm from the Native Plant Society, and a native plant is a species that naturally occurs in California without having a human origin or introduction. So they evolved here and have been shaped by our natural processes and weather patterns and are adapted to our climates and soils and geology. Conversely, a non-native plant is one that was brought here by people. Introduced plants were brought into California either through escaped garden plants, agriculture, or as hitchhikers when seeds hitch a ride on shoes or clothing or vehicles. Introduced plants are not necessarily bad. An example would be naked ladies or amaryllis. They have the bright pink flowers you see on the side of the road. They don't really produce too many individuals. And as far as I know, they don't displace any native species. So they're introduced but not invasive. However, our invasive plants cause damage and threaten our natural areas and our native species. A lot of our invasive species have some evolutionary advantages that help outcompete native plants. We have a lot of habitat specialists in California that can only live in specific environments, but a lot of these invasive species are generalists, so they can live anywhere. And they produce really large amounts of seeds. So like this pampas grass here, each one of those plumes is just full of thousands and thousands of seeds. So every time you take one home or move one around, you're spreading the seeds. So it might look pretty, but unfortunately, it's responsible for displacing a lot of our very special native plants. And what is a rare plant? Rare plants can be rare for a number of different reasons. They can have a small geographic range, typically 50 miles or less. So the plants that we're going to meet today, most of them are only found in the Santa Cruz Mountains, which is a small range. They only have a few populations. A lot of these species have less than 10 populations for the whole species. Some of them have very low numbers of individuals in each population, or they're facing conservation threats throughout their ranges. And in many cases, plants are rare for one or more of these reasons. And the reason why we care about rare plants and our native flora is that we aren't just protecting a single plant, but we're protecting the whole ecosystem when we protect and conserve native plants. We have our pollinators that have co-evolved with them, wildlife that use them for food and nesting material. And when you take away a native plant or it declines or becomes locally extirpated, then that's removing a link out of the food web. And our native plants, by conserving them, that's a great way to help protect a lot of our special places in California as well. So the beautiful yellow flower in the lower right is our Santa Cruz tar plant, which you can see at some of the parks in Santa Cruz County. And there's some special space that's been put aside to protect these flowers. So instead of having entirely developed areas, we've got some great green spaces in the middle of the city where we can walk and enjoy the view and see wildlife, all because this special plant helped us get that land set aside. So California has more native plants than any other state in the US. And a really unique and special feature of our flora is that over 1/3 of our plants are rare. One other thing I should mention about rare plants, I'll kind of use rare or special status interchangeably. And a special status is something like the Endangered Species Act. If the state or federal listing occurs for that plant, then they might be ranked as threatened or endangered. And CNPS also has a rare plant ranking system. And so all of these special statuses help conserve and protect these plants and help stop development or projects that might impact them. So most of these rare plants are endemic to California. They're only found here and nowhere else. And over 44,000 of these rare plant populations have been documented. However, just documenting a population once is not enough. Oftentimes, early documentation of these populations doesn't list numbers. So we don't know if it's a single plant or 1,000 plants. We don't know if the population is stable or increasing in numbers or declining. And rare plant populations can face sudden declines very quickly, especially in areas with a lot of habitat fragmentation or other interference from people. So not just enough to document once, we have to keep going back and monitoring these populations as much as we can. However, 44,000 different populations is more work than I can do alone, or even with what I can do with my work staff. So a great way to kind of overcome the limitations that we have as professional scientists is to harness the power of community science. So anyone can be a community scientist. You don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to have formal training in natural history. All you need to do is have an interest in science and be able to make some observations and record some data. There are all sorts of different types of community science projects and programs and different online platforms. Community scientists can map and record species locations. You can record phenology of a specific life history trait of a plant. You can look for old records of species and update them with current information, which is what my volunteers do for my work project, Rare Plant Treasure Hunt. You can monitor species numbers and composition over time. A great example is Academy of Sciences has a intertidal monitoring program where community science volunteers go out and sample and record species in the tide pools, and that project helped detect starfish wasting disease in California. You can also use community science to answer scientific questions on status and distribution, or even to record behaviors, like LA Natural History Museum records mating behaviors in lizards. And so all this can be done over community science platforms like iNaturalist. eBird is another popular community science platform which records species distribution and numbers worldwide. And CalFlora is another great one that's just for plants, and we're going to learn about some of those today. So now each of you are invited to join us and become community scientists. And with the CZU Lightning Complex Fire, it has been devastating. It has changed everything that we know and love about the Santa Cruz Mountains. But it's also a chance to observe a lot of interesting ecological phenomena and maybe see species that have never been recorded in Santa Cruz County before, or haven't been seen here in a long time. So I'm going to give you a brief background on fire ecology, and then we'll launch into our rare plants. So last summer in August, the CZU Lightning Complex Fire started in the Santa Cruz Mountains because of multiple lightning strikes all around the mountains. Burned over 86,000 acres, destroyed thousands of buildings and homes, displaced communities across the mountains, and caused mass evacuations. After the fire, a lot of what we were left with is sort of a moonscape where everything looks like ash. We see dead plants, we see dying plants. It's pretty bleak, it can be depressing. And for a lot of us, we've had to say goodbye to a lot of places that we really love. People have lost homes, they've lost their favorite hiking trails, their favorite campgrounds. I've volunteered at Big Basin for about 6 years, and Big Basin is just absolutely my favorite place in the world. And I know a lot of us we're really missing these areas. And in a lot of ways, what we loved about them will never be the same again. But in many other ways, it's a transformation or a reset. So even though it looks like a moonscape right now, there is a lot of magic happening beneath the surface. So our plants in California have evolved with wildfire, both lightning caused fires, which typically burn low heat and low intensity. You might hear that described as a healthy burn. Those types of fires often remove brush and debris and leave space for other species to compete and have room for seeds to germinate and new species to move in. We also had a history of cultural burning in Santa Cruz by our indigenous peoples that helped maintain coastal prairie ecosystems and also provided the necessary fire return interval and fire regime that a lot of these species thrive and depend on. Unfortunately, today we are seeing a lot of mega fires caused by human sources and often made worse by climate change and many years of fire suppression. Over the past 100 years, we have often not done any cultural burning or controlled burning, and that's led to a lot of accumulation of fuels, much more so than these ecosystems would have naturally. And that's kind of what is leading to our mega fires that are happening right now. So our fire followers are species that rely on fire for some part of their life cycle. When a fire comes through a landscape, it's kind of like hitting a reset button where it levels the playing field and creates bare ground that allows seeds to germinate and new species to move in. Fires can temporarily clear invasive grasses and shrubs that crowd out flowers and other small plants and seedlings. Leaves open canopy space with enough sun for them to grow. However, these fire followers will disappear over time as succession continues, and eventually trees and shrubs will move back in and the openings will close up. So some of our fire followers we only see for a year after fires, like fire poppies, more common in Southern California. They've been seen in Monterey County. I'm curious if we'll get some in Santa Cruz. A lot of these fire followers will stick around for a few years, but the numbers will decrease over time as that succession continues. So these fire followers have incredibly long-lasting seeds, and they can last in the seed bank for 100 years or more. Bush mallows, this beautiful pink flower in the lower right, those seeds have been observed to come back after 100-year intervals between burns. And they're a true fire follower, and they will not persist on a landscape in any large number as time continues since the last fire. A lot of seeds use a germination cue from smoke or heat or both, which signals that it's an appropriate time to germinate because there's bare ground with the fire having cleared everything out. So that can cause these mass germination events like the bare grass you see in the left with beautiful white flowers. Typically, these species can be present in small numbers without fires, but then after a fire, you see kind of these mass germination events. However, fire doesn't affect all landscapes or all places in California equally. So it's hard to predict the effects of the fire right now. Fire intensity and severity can really vary throughout an entire burn zone, and especially with our steep topography and different types of climates, depending on if you get marine layers or on the hot side of the Santa Cruz Mountains, that can really influence fire behavior and change how intense the burn is. Different plant communities burn more intensely. Chaparral has evolved with a much more frequent fire regime, and those plants accumulate a lot of fuels and burn very hot and very quickly, whereas redwood forests are typically more cool and moist and have lower intensity fires in the understory. And similarly to that, all of our plants have different responses to fire. So our redwoods and giant sequoias are large and long-lived, and they have adaptations that help them survive the fires. Other plants, like some of the rare plants we'll meet today, the adults will completely die back and go away, but it causes mass germination events. So they either send up lots of seedlings and sprouts, or a lot of the seeds germinate at once. And then other species have no tolerance for fire, and they leave the burn zone after the fire and eventually recolonize from neighboring populations many years after the fire. Okay, so now that we've learned a little bit about fire in California, I'm going to introduce you to some very special rare plants. So here's our popular Bonnie Dune or Silverleaf Manzanita, which a lot of you said you had seen before. If you visited the Bonnie Dune Preserve, it's the most common shrub out there. There's a lot of manzanitas in California. They're pretty hard to identify. It could take a lot of practice, and even just in the Bonnie Dune Reserve and the Santa Cruz Mountains, we've got a lot of different rare manzanita species. But today we're just going to talk about this one because it's a little bit easier to identify. It's only found in the Sandhills Habitat in the Santa Cruz Mountains, so only a couple of thousand acres. And it's often present in these very thick and dense stands, like at the preserve in Bonnie Dune. But it's globally rare because it only has a few of these stands and they're all in Santa Cruz County. So even though you see thousands of individuals, they only occur in a few places. And with habitat fragmentation or development, those places could go away or change or be altered very easily. So we still want to protect them even though there's thousands of plants. And true to name, Silverleaf Manzanita, they have this beautiful gray-green color, which stands out from the other local Manzanita species that often have a deeper green color on their leaves. So Manzanitas have two different strategies for surviving fire. They can either resprout from a burl, which think of like a big bulbous trunk, like a tree. And after the fire, the burl sends up new sprouts and the plant regrows from the same trunk. Or Bonnie Dune Manzanita will produce extra seeds, and then the seeds have extra germination rates after the fire. So Bonnie Dune Preserve burned in 2008 in the Martin fire, and all of these plants that you see in the photo have regrown since the Martin fire in 2008. So they had near complete adult mortality. They had excellent germination and survival after the burn. So here's a photo of the sand chaparral habitat that they live in. Sandhills Habitat is really unique. It's composed of old marine seabed deposits that have weathered down from sandstone. And it's very nutrient poor. It doesn't hold a lot of organic matter, and water drains fairly quickly. So because of that, it can be hard to survive in the sandhills. And that's led to us having 4 plant species that are only found in the Santa Cruz Sandhills and nowhere else in the world. So our Manzanita is one of those. And they're in this chaparral type habitat in the sandhills, where they're often one of the most dominant shrubs that you'll see. And Manzanita is Spanish for little apple, because of these adorable fruits that you'll see on the right over here. Those are the seeds of the Manzanita developing, and they look just like cute little apples. Here's another beautiful plant that I love, the Lomond buckwheat. This is another species that's endemic to our sandhills. They can get pretty tall, several feet tall. They have a basal rosette or a clump of leaves, and they're these kind of leathery dark green leaves, and then they have a bare stem going up to flowers that are in tight clusters, kind of like pom-poms. These guys need scattered openings throughout the sandhills, so they can exist near the manzanitas, but the understory is too dense, and they're mostly going to grow places that have a less crowded understory. And they're threatened by mining and development and road work. Some of them are right along the road on Graham Hill Road. So even though they can be pretty widespread in the sandhills, they are also, as succession occurs and those openings and gaps close up, then the buckwheat also goes away from those locations. We also have closely related other varieties of the same species. So we're going to talk more about king plants later in the talk. And so You'll just want to be careful when you're IDing this one that you're truly within the Santa Cruz Sandhills. And if you're kind of on the edges of those habitat, then you'll want to key them out using the Jepson Manual, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Here is the super cute Ben Lomond spine flower. These guys are only a couple of centimeters tall. I wish I had something for scale in these photos, but these are tiny, tiny flowers, only a few millimeters wide. And they're called spine flowers because they have little spikes on the bracts around the flowers. And similar to the Ben Lomond buckwheat, they're in the same family as them, even though one is several feet tall and has big pom-poms, and these are tiny little sprawling ground cover flowers. They're also only found in open areas, and they have trouble competing with invasive plants and chaparral and other shrubs moving in. And they're suffering from a lack of fire, where our fire regime has suppressed natural fire and has not, they are often not able to compete with everything that's moving in. So their preferred habitat is this bare soil sand parkland habitat on the left. Looks kind of like going to the beach, nice and open, don't see any invasives to crowd them out. However, sometimes if they have a good seed year, they can keep a foothold in with invasives. So picture on the right under the oak tree is all invasive grass, and you can see kind of that pink hue, and that is thousands of spine flowers. So despite the odds, they're sometimes still able to keep a foothold in some disturbed habitat. And they also like some types of disturbances because they like the bare ground. They're often found on roadsides or edges of trails where some intermediate amount of foot traffic from humans can help maintain those bare ground spaces. So keep an eye out if you're in Felton or Scotts Valley or Ben Lomond and you see hot pink on the side of the road. It might just be a nice spread of Ben Lomond spine flowers. Here's our very rare Ben Lomond wallflower or Santa Cruz wallflower. This is also endemic to the Santa Cruz Sandhills. Only a few populations, and unlike our buckwheat and our manzanita, which have very large populations, this flower does not have large populations anywhere. Most are dozens to hundreds of individuals. They've been really affected by development and habitat fragmentation, so they only occur in a few places. They have a biennial life cycle. So typically with plants, annuals like our spine flower, the adult plant puts out seeds, the whole plant dies, and then the babies regrow from the seeds from the previous year. Perennial plants like the buckwheat and the manzanita last multiple years, year to year. And so this wallflower has an in-between life history strategy where it lasts for 2 years. So first it puts up this silly rosette in the lower right, which looks kind of like a paintbrush or like a pipe cleaner or something weird. But that's actually the first vegetative part of this very rare plant. And then the second year it puts up these beautiful yellow flowers. And then after it flowers, then it dies and leaves behind some seeds. And we don't know a ton about this plant's relationship with fire. We know that it does thrive when it has some bare ground and bare soil to germinate seeds on. So it probably likes the clearing, but unlike the other species we've talked about, it probably doesn't leave behind a very big seed bank. So even the little spine flowers, each plant puts out hundreds of seeds. And these guys just have a really low seed bank. So that is probably why our populations that we do still have are a lot smaller and many are declining. So here's a rare tree, the Santa Cruz cypress, only found in the Santa Cruz Mountains, in the Sandhills, and there's a population on Butana Ridge just over the San Mateo County line. Only 7 populations, one of the rarest cypresses in the world. And these guys have a really special life history trait. The cones are serotinous, which means they're open from fire. So these trees actually rely on fire to regenerate the population. The adults don't live very long and they experience complete mortality during a fire. But as the adults die, the cones open up and they leave behind a huge seed bank. And so here's kind of some images of the life cycle. The adult trees develop these cones. Fire comes through. The cones in picture 1 are fused and tightly closed. And picture number 3 is what they look like shortly after the fire. They've opened up. And then the seeds are ready to disperse and germinate. So they leave behind just thousands of seeds after the cones open up. And then shortly after, they will grow into these little seedlings, and that will restore the population and keep it healthy and help it continue for years to come. So with no fire, eventually each of these Santa Cruz cypress populations would disappear because they're relying on the cue of fire to germinate. And similarly to our other rare plant friends, they just can't compete with other things in the understory without fire to clear and reset everything. And another rare tree with a similar life history strategy is the Monterey Pine. And Monterey Pine is a really interesting plant because in its native range, it's actually very rare, but it's one of the most popular and widely grown trees in the timber trade. So it's grown in more countries and different continents than I could name. But in the wild, it only has 3 different native stands in California and 2 on islands off the coast of Baja. So we have a stand in Año Nuevo and Rancho del Oso. There's another stand on the Monterey Peninsula, and then there's more down in San Luis Obispo near San Simeon. And so this is another example of, even though it's rare, there's thousands of trees in a stand. So if you are on Highway 1 by Waddell Beach and you look up in the mountains, you'll see Monterey Pines going way, way, way back up into the mountains and just covering tons of space. But that's actually a very rare tree. So you can check these guys out in Año Nuevo or on the side of the road on Highway 1. You can get a good look at these Monterey Pines. And similar to the Santa Cruz cypress, they have serotinous cones. So they're another tree that needs fire to regenerate and restore the stand. Photo on the right is what it looked like after the fire. Before, there was brush and brambles several feet up, 3 or 4 feet up, and there's no room for the seedlings to grow. So now the understory has been cleared, and it's hard to say what the adult survival is going to be like after the fire. Probably better than we thought, but now we can at least count on lots of new plants germinating and moving in. So the fire has again bought this population a lot more time and pushed the reset button. Okay, and here is the one I'm most excited about because what's not to love? This is a bright purple penstemon. It's called the Santa Cruz Mountains beard tongue. The genus is penstemon, so you can call it that too. Looks kind of like a snapdragon. So these are also endemic to the Santa Cruz Mountains, and they occur in openings, usually in the forest or chaparral. And they do seem to have a relationship with fire and disturbance, where most of the places that they still occur have either had brush fires or controlled burn or other disturbances like brush clearing. So what's interesting is most of these records for this plant are really old, from the 1880s to the 1950s, scattered all over the Santa Cruz Mountains. And most of those populations have gone away with time as shrubs have moved back in and the openings have closed up. Then that opportunity for these plants to persist goes away, and they leave behind their seeds in the seed bank waiting for the next fire. So as of right now, there's 5 documented populations that are known. but I am really excited to see this plant after the fire. The largest population is in Bonnie Dune, right around kind of Felton Empire Grade area. And I am just really optimistic that this is one we could see blooming all over Bonnie Dune after the fire. So keep an eye out if you see this large purple snapdragon looking plant. They can get really tall, 1 to 2 feet tall. These beautiful deep purple flowers, and they typically bloom mid-May to mid-June. So start looking for these guys in May. And if you see a photo of one, absolutely take a photo and put it on iNaturalist. We do have other native blue and purple snapdragons, or penstemons, sorry, I've got snapdragon in my head. It's not necessarily the rare one if you see it outside of the Santa Cruz Mountains, but it should be the only one that you would see in the Bonnie Dune area. So if you see one like this, definitely take a photo. Okay, so now that we have met some of our rare plants, I'm going to walk you through some resources that I use as a botanist that you can use to help build up your skills learning about plants. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because I want to provide a quick overview, and you should all have links to these resources sent out before the talk. And if not, we'll make sure everyone gets it before you leave. So I'm just going to kind of give you a preview, and then you can go through them and figure out how they can help you learn about plants. So our first tool is iNaturalist. This is a platform that records observations from all species. You can record moss, bacteria, fish, bugs, whatever you think of. If it's alive, you can put an observation of it in iNaturalist. It's a worldwide database, so anywhere you travel in the world, you can submit observations. What I love about iNaturalist is back in the olden days, I had a lot of nature notebooks that were very disorganized and frequently lost. And who knows what happened to any of that data that I kept. It's scattered around in different boxes and bookshelves. But with iNaturalist, this is like a digital natural history notebook. So if I see a flower, I can say, I think I saw this last year. I'm going to look through my observations, and then I can find out the scientific name again. What's really cool about this app is it has a crowdsource model for identification. So you do not have to be an expert or a pro to enter these observations. You just put down whatever level of taxonomy that you recognize. So if you see a tree and it looks like a coast live oak, you can enter it as tree or oak or coast live oak, whatever you recognize can go in there. And then other experts and community scientists from around the world will weigh in and make identifications. And if there's consensus, if everyone agrees that it's the same species, then it gets upgraded to research grade. And then that becomes data that researchers and land managers and agencies can use to help conduct studies or to manage their resources. So there's a lot you can do with this app. You can look up information on a specific species. You can look up points and see where it occurs. You can use the search tools to find out the phenology. So if you want to find out if your favorite wildflower is blooming, then you can use the search filters and see if anyone's seen it recently. You can look up families or species, filter by date, location, and iNaturalist also has a cool feature called projects. And a project is a way to organize the same type of observation in one place. So if you are a researcher and you are studying birds, you can create a project for bird observations within your given study area. Anyone that makes the bird observation in that area, those observations will get fed into your project. And so our project that we are currently working on is the California Fire Followers Project. And it's going to cover the areas of all of the 2020 fires. And when you visit the project page, then you can see map areas for the whole state. and you can check out what people have been uploading to the project. And we'd like you all to join the project so you can stay current on updates, and we'll have some fun things like prizes and contests. And then we're able to see all of your data and help share it with land managers. So it gives us a better management tool if you're able to join the project. And then another cool feature is that if you are already a Naturalist Pro, then you can help ID observations made by other people on the platform. So I'm not going to go too in depth into how to make the observations or use the apps, because there's a lot of great in-depth tutorials. So I've sent a link out to one of them, and you can use that link to learn all about how to make the observations or how to identify other people's observations and learn more about projects and how to join. So here's what our project page looks like. You get a feed showing all the observations people are making. And then here's the super cool search feature. So you can filter by all sorts of different things: the location, the project, the date range. And you can use this to look up where and when to see species that you're interested in finding. And so here's just kind of what some of the data looks like. As you can see, this is for flowers in the genus Lewissia. Some are ID'd to genus, and then some have been confirmed down to species, and those are research grade. And as you're identifying, if you agree with that identification, you can hit that button and click agree. If you think it's a different species, then you have a chance to list the species that you think it is. And over the comments, then you can engage with the poster and get more information about the observation and have a discussion on what the ID might be. So this is the main tool that we're going to be using as fire followers. I think it's the easiest app to use of many of these different platforms. It's fun, it's addictive, it's a great way to start conversations with other local naturalists. So I hope you guys try it out, and it's a lot of fun. Here is the platform that's just for plant data, CalFlora. I absolutely love CalFlora. I used it multiple times a day, every day. CalFlora has information on all plants in California, both native and introduced. So you can use this to look up weeds or invasive plants, as well as native plants and rare plants. You can search by county. You can search by the life form, whether it's a shrub or a tree or an herb. And so if you want to get a county list, or if you saw a tree you want to learn the identification of, then you can search by trees for your county. So this is a really good tool to help you get started on learning more about plants. And then each species has these super cool profiles that shows their distribution in California. It shows what months they bloom in. It links to photos. It shows the taxonomy of what family and genus they're in, and has links to other resources on the bottom. So this is often where I start when I want to get more information about a plant. And the coolest feature of all, it's called What Grows Here. And it allows you to search the database for a given area. So if you're going on a hike, you can pick the location. You can draw a polygon or search in the map area. You can pick the bloom month and map plants that are blooming when you're going out. So you could pick a bloom month for March. You can do a filter for rare plants or invasive plants. So this is great both for planning trips or planning an outing, or if you've seen something you don't recognize on your hike, you can use this to help narrow it down and figure out what you saw. And it also produces a plant list with photos and names and the bloom periods. So you can save that as a PDF on your phone or print it out and bring it with you on your hike. So I really love this tool. And I think it's a great way to get started on learning some of your local plants. So this is a more advanced resource. The Jepson Manual is our our main source for plant identification. It's this giant book. I don't know if you can see with my background. Um, Absolutely massive. This is what we used to have to bring into the field to identify plants, but luckily now everything that's in the book is maintained online. Um, so Jepson Manual has a dichotomous key, which is sort of like a choose your own adventure book for identification, where it gives you two options at each step, and you use that to narrow down which species you're looking at. So for every species, it'll have the key for the genus and the family and a description of the plant. So when you need to narrow down the ID, you can read the description. A really cool feature of the key is that it gives definitions for all of the botany terms. So you can hover over the key and see the definition, which is a great way to learn botany terms. So this will take some practice. I know it's kind of intimidating, but don't be scared if this is not your thing. There's a lot of progress you can still make with iNaturalist and CalFlora. But if you really get into plants, then you'll want to learn how to use the Jepson eFlora. And my suggestion would be to find a plant that you know the ID of and work through the key based on that plant. And that's a really good way to practice. And here's what the key looks like. And all of those terms that are underlined are botany terms you can see the definition of, or it'll show an illustration for some of them. So this is a great way to dive more into botany. And I know it's kind of intimidating, but I hope you check out the link and read some descriptions for some of your favorite plants and go out and practice some keying. Oh, oops, that's out of order. Let's pretend that's not there. Also included a link to our CMPS fire recovery guide. This is a guide that was prepared for the wine country area, but it's got a lot of basics on fire ecology and information on succession and kind of some guidelines if you're a property owner that's been affected by fire. But I recommend that everyone checks it out just because the fire ecology basics are really good. So the link I sent will take you to a form where you leave your email address, and then you'll receive a link to download a PDF copy. If you're interested in learning more about rare and special status plants, then these endangered species fact sheets that were prepared for the Elkhorn Slew Coastal Training Program are a really good resource. They have profiles for each of our special status plants in the Monterey Bay area. So it lists the plant names, has ID information, habitat, conservation, and life history traits, and has a list of references at the bottom. So these are really the most comprehensive accounts that we have for our rare species. I use them all the time. They're easy to read and understand. And so this is a really great resource if you want to do a deeper dive on some of these rare plants that we've talked about today. And then CNPS also maintains the inventory of rare and endangered plants of California. This is another free online resource. You can search for your county, you can search by species name. It will tell you all of the special statuses like threatened or endangered for state and federal that a plant has, list the number of populations, and then we'll show some of the threats that these plants experience. So here's a county list that you can create of all the rare plants if you want to look up one for Santa Cruz County. Oops, that's it. So there's also different search features. You can search by bloom month, life form, and other filters. And so this is a great way to find out what rare plants you might be seeing when you're out and about. Okay, so hopefully now that we've kind of done an overview of these resources, you'll be able to explore and figure out how to use them and start building your tool set as community scientists. So, as most of us know, a lot of the burn area is still closed to the public. So, Big Basin, Butano, and the burn areas in Henry Cowell are still closed. Um, these landscapes need time to heal. A lot of them are very sensitive, not safe for people to go into. So please don't trespass or go into closed areas for this project. I know it sounds really exciting, but these fire followers will still be around for a couple of years. So when things do reopen, we'll have a chance to go out and see them. In the meantime, if you have access to private land that burn, either yours or a friend or family member, I would encourage you to reach out to them and go check it out, or tell them about using iNaturalist and joining the project. Hopefully we will have more opportunities in the burn area in the future. If you'd like to see some of these rare species and practice learning IDs with them, I recommend the Bonnie Doon Ecological Reserve or the Sandhills portion of Henry Cowell. You'll be able to check out a lot of these species and start practicing ID. So even if we can't get in the burn area right now or can't get in as much as we'd like to, it's a great opportunity to start building your skills in different areas. And whenever we're able to get in there, then you will be ready to go and start making observations and learning more about some of our cool fire followers. And before you go out in the field, if you check out the Fire Followers website, there's a Know Before You Go section that has tips on safety and accessibility. Even though locally there are not many burn areas open to the public, on the website we do list other burn areas that are currently open. So East Bay Regional Parks has some areas kind of by Mount Diablo. There are places to go in Napa and Sonoma to check out the burns. So I'd encourage you to check out that list and maybe visit some other burn areas outside of Santa Cruz County and get a chance to see what's coming up. And I hope very soon we can go out in the field together. Some of you will be joining us at the Bonnie Doon Preserve, and we're hoping to keep offering trainings and events. And I'm really excited to see what all of you observe. So here's my contact information. Feel free to email me with plant questions or about using iNaturalist. And I live locally, so I hope that I can meet some of you out and about, or we can do some field trips together. And with that, I think we can open it up for questions.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. I have added some new plants to my list that I want to see after that. And we have had some questions come in that were specifically about using iNaturalist that we can get to. And if you're joining us and you have questions, put them in now. We are approaching like 7:30, but we'll stay after for a little while to get through questions. And someone's curious about like the burn areas that CNPS decided to include within the Fire Followers project, and noting that certain ones aren't currently on it. Nikki mentioned the Dolan, Carmel, and River fires.
So we have all of the burn areas from 2020 are in the project. So all of those burn areas should be in the project.
I think I am noticing, I just went to the page. Let me pull it up. So one thing I noticed is, let me refresh it. There's like a view more option. So Nikki, that might have been what it was. So if you press this, it's just that those fires don't have as many observations yet. So all the more reason to join.
You can also use the map on the project page, so you can zoom by map area. I'm sure there's some technical glitches. Our project just launched. So you know, if you find problems, then we've got some support on the webpage and people to email to get some of those issues sorted out. But yeah, you should be able to see all the burn areas from last year. So only 2020 fires doesn't include anything previously. But hopefully you'll be able to find the fires of your choice and go see them.
Yeah, and I'll
And
just share too, just another little feature that I didn't notice at first is like, so this says leave because I've already joined, but so you can join the project there, but also there's like, that's for the entire Fire Followers project, but then you can click on the individual projects too and join and leave those as well.
And for each of those, you can check out the observations that's coming in, see who's observing, how many people have been in there. If you're seeing observations coming from closed areas, we are reaching out to park staff and researchers. So while those areas are closed, we can have fun IDing some of those observations in the identify feature.
Yeah, and I guess I'll share my screen one more time about that because I was really excited to see. I had never seen a project kind of set up this way, and it might just be my own ignorance, but I really appreciated, there's a link that we have. If you go to our website for the project, you can explore lots of different links, but through the main Fire Followers page. There are lots of resources, and if you click on the like ID plants one, it brings you here, and you can just really quickly kind of like skim through, like, oh yeah, that's a wild daffodil, I agree, that's a coastal live oak, I agree, or I'm not sure if that's a coastal live oak, I have to click on it. Oh yeah, I think so. So there are lots of really cool features in this, and we kind of mentioned that we have some in-person trainings as well that we're going to be doing. We got one this weekend, which I think it's full, but we have another session on April 15th, and I'll send links so you can sign up for those. But that's another opportunity for you to like get us in front of you to help walk you through certain steps, and we'll also send out a link to a survey at the end. And if you have specific requests of like what other things you'd like us to cover, and if like a deep dive into iNaturalist is one of those, you can write that in the feedback. But yeah,
we're hoping to offer some more tutorials, so videos on how to make the identifications, and kind of organize some basic botany resources. So there'll definitely be more tutorials and instruction coming out in the next month or so.
Yeah. And also another thing that you said, Amy, about how a lot of the burn areas are not presently open, but I also want to just like reiterate that this project, it's a long-term monitoring project, because looking at the impacts of fire, it's not a snapshot. You don't just like go there once and say like, okay, this is what happened from the fire. You keep going back over and over, and we want to know what happens year 1, year 2, year 3. And so we'll continue making observations for years to come. So there's plenty of time.
A lot of cool and rare species won't even necessarily be up this year. Like the manzanitas and the bush mallows, we'll see those more like 2 or 3 years in. It'll be easier to see them and identify them. So, so the composition will change over time, but there will be lots of cool stuff to see for years to come.
Cool. Yeah. And we did get a question from Casey that's about rare and endemic plants. And Casey's wondering if there are any rare endemic plants that can be cultivated.
Yeah, so you can actually go to San Lorenzo Garden Center and buy a Bonnie Dune Manzanita. There are lots of rare plants that are cultivated in horticulture, or UCSC Arboretum and other botanic gardens cultivate them for research and conservation purposes. The funny thing about rare plants, kind of like our Monterey Pine, things can be so rare in the wild, but then when you plant and cultivate them and grow them in better conditions than they have in the wild, they can do great. So there's another cool feature called Calscape. I'll see if I can drop that link in the chat. But that's the native plant gardening tool, and you can use that to look up rare plants that are available in the nursery trade. And I like to grow rare plants at home because I think it's a fun way to learn about them and appreciate them. So that might be something that some of you are interested in doing.
Yeah, speaking of like those tools and resources that you shared, the Cal Flora one of like being able to create like a polygon of like, I want to go here, what's in here. I had
Oh my
forgotten about
gosh.
that, and I'm so excited
It's
about that.
really
That's a much
addictive.
more user-friendly way of picking my next hike than what I currently do, which is not user-friendly. So thanks for the reminder of that. And then Kara is interested. She said, for monitoring numbers each year, which platform is best to use? And then follows up with, I mean, if I return to a certain patch of rare plants each year and record the numbers I observe each year, is it best to upload my findings to CalFlora or to iNaturalist?
Let me send you another link. I've got my own project in iNaturalist for the rare plant treasure hunt. And just bear with me for a second while I pull that up. So if you join this project, then you'll be able to upload numbers and threats and associated species and other characteristics that we record when we're doing a rare plant survey. So the Fire Followers project will automatically upload any observations from the burn area. The rare plant project, you do have to manually upload to that project. And if you have any questions with that one, send me an email and I'd be happy to help you kind of get sorted out. But then that's important data that we can use for management. So we can share it with land managers and Department of Fish and Wildlife and with our rare plant program. And kind of keeping track of numbers and declines can help us intervene if there is a human cause reason for declining. When we're able to, we can work on conserving those populations better if we have good monitoring data.
Yeah. And I would just say that, it's maybe you can speak to this, Amy, but for me, it seems like people like you are monitoring iNaturalist, and certain plants are, on there, they're marked as rare. And so they automatically get kind of like their location obscured. And so if you upload to iNaturalist, if that information is of interest to people, those people will find it, is my perception.
Yeah. So if you join this project in the Fire Followers, then CNPS will be able to see your private coordinates. So it's bad for the general public to see them because then they could exploit or harvest. We would use the coordinates only for conservation purposes. So that's one advantage of when you join the project. Then we do get better data from these rare plant observations. Most rare plant species will be automatically obscured for the public view, but that's a really good point because I often obscure if I find like a nice patch of wildflowers on the roadside and I'm like, ooh, someone's going to come and pick that lily, then I might obscure it. Dahlias, which are native succulents, are a target of poaching, so I'll obscure dahlias. Same with reptiles and amphibians, I'll often obscure those observations too. So if it's something that you are worried about people finding, you have the option to obscure it. However, it's hard to say. I don't know of specific documented cases of citizen science platforms being used for nefarious things like poaching. So overall, I would say it's not documented to be a big issue, but if you are concerned about it, then you can use the obscure feature.
Yeah. And we do have some other questions. So Casey's wondering if we have any sense of when some of the currently closed areas will be reopening.
We don't. Big Basin could be anywhere from another 1 to 4 years. I think state parks they are working so hard to make the areas safe for everyone, and it's going to take a long time. And they'll be creating management plans going forward to help recover from the fire and prevent future mega fires, and that takes a lot of time. So I would guess the different areas that are closed will reopen slowly, maybe one trail at a time. So I wish I had a definite answer, but we're still going to have to be patient and wait a little longer.
Yeah. And Shauna asked again, kind of like about appropriate places to park and explore. by foot. And so just to reiterate that the Bonnie Doon Ecological Reserve is a public space that does have parts of the reserve open, parts of it are closed, and that's where we're going to be leading our in-person trainings this Saturday and on April 15th, and there's still space to come out with us on April 15th if you want to register. But that's a great spot, and there's plenty to see there. And again, if you like go back time after time, you'll be noticing different things, and that's really useful information. So I encourage everyone to just be like stoked on that. And like, yes, there will be other places that will open, but there's still really interesting things to explore right now. And we're really lucky that parts of that reserve are open. You can see aspects that burned in the Martin fire a little over a decade ago, and then you can see things that just burned. And also it's this rare habitat. It's very cool.
It's really amazing. And it's there's a big parking area next to the fire station. The areas that are open and closed are well signed and will be easy to figure out once you get there. So so there's kind of one main open trail going into the preserve right now, but if you just check the signs, you'll be able to see what's open.
Okay. And then Barbara is interested in if there's any protocol for indicating whether the observation was made in a severe burn area or a moderate burn area, or an area within the burn zone that was skipped over by the fire.
So we don't have an in-depth monitoring protocol that's going to go into this project. A lot of things like burn severity can be subjective or take more training. There are notes and comment fields, so you can add whatever notes you'd like to attach to your observation. So nothing like that for iNaturalist. CalFlora does have an app for you to upload observations, and they do have a post-fire data collection form. So that would be one option to look into if you wanted to get more specifics on post-fire recovery. But kind of the goal for this project is more to get a lot of people involved and out there making observations rather than necessarily training in like a more intensive protocol. So we hope that it's easy and will be minimal training. But what's really exciting about community science is you might find certain things you become interested in as you learn more. So maybe you get really into manzanitas and you want to go see all these weird manzanitas and learn to ID them. Or maybe you learn about insects and what's coming out after the fire, or even you develop other interests into geology and soils. So, you know, I would just feel free to explore, and whatever you end up being interested in, there's going to be tons of great resources and other platforms you can use as well. So I hope you guys are able to have fun with it and kind of develop some new interests with the project as well.
Yeah, and I would just add that one of the things that I love about community science is that you don't necessarily know what your data is going to be used for or who's going to utilize it. You're giving it out to the world, and there are going to be lots of different researchers, people who have their own interests, who have their own projects that are, you know, like maybe grant funded and have all these strict protocols, whatever, but they may still have a use for your data. And so when you do upload to iNaturalist, there's GPS coordinates. And so people who are doing these vegetation surveys, who are monitoring how severe the burn was in certain areas, they would also, you know, conceivably be able to compare your GPS location to that and be able to figure that out themselves. So it's really just kind of like an exercise in optimism, I think, to use iNaturalist, where it can be helpful to you. You can learn a lot by the algorithm helping to, you know, tell you what you saw, and other people out there identifying your observations for you. But also, you know, when you do it, you're hopeful that it could be useful to someone else.
So it's kind of like the museum collection where it's preserved and has data associated with it, and we don't always know how that will be used or who will find it in the future. But, you know, I often receive messages from different researchers from around the world like someone will write to me and say, I'm a grad student, I'm researching ambostomid salamanders. Could you add all of your salamanders in this genus to my project? And I'm going to use it for my research project. So, check your message box on iNaturalist, because you might get some cool communications about your observations. And you don't have to be a pro or a trained naturalist to make a really cool discovery. I found on a lot of my field trips, people who are new to science or new to botany will be the first one to find the rare plants that I might have missed. So, I just encourage people to record whatever they can, and it might be very useful to someone in the future.
Yeah. And yeah, you don't necessarily need to know what it is, because other people will be looking. And if you are someone out there who does, I know that we've got some people joining us who are very experienced botanists or community scientists. And so we encourage you to also like help out these other people who are just getting started by going in and using that identify feature. Because yeah, whoever took the photo and made the upload, they might not know, or might be using a conservative ID. So yeah, that's another way to be involved. And Barbara had another question. She said, I'll be spending time in the North Complex Fire area. Is there a way of connecting with people who are collecting info in the area and what plants to look for?
Let's see, that's the north part of our local burn area.
I think that might be one of the fires. I could be wrong. Let me look at the.
So first you could check out who's making the observations, since you'll be able to see all of the observers who are currently accessing those burn areas and uploading observations. So like, for example, if you check out CZU Complex, you'll see Christian Schwartz, who has a research permit, who's been doing research, has been uploading mushroom observations. So, you might be able to get a sense from looking at the participant list. You'd also be welcome to send me an email, and if I know of any ongoing projects and partners, I can let you know. We're also building up our partners section on the website. So within a few weeks, we'll have lists of partner groups and where everyone's based out of and what their individual projects are. So if you check back in a few weeks, then you'll also be able to see some more collaborators like the museum listed on the webpage.
Yeah, and I'll just share it. So I did look it up. It is one of the fires, and I'm is very interesting. I'll be up there too, because I have family who has property near there. It's kind of like east of Oroville, north of Marysville, in the in like Plumas area.
Yeah, I haven't connected with anyone specifically. Another good resource is CNPS has chapters all over the state. Normally we would be having fun in-person meetings. Right now, a lot of chapters are doing virtual meetings. If you go to the CNPS webpage, then there's a map and you can search for different chapters. So you can also, if you're going to be in a different part of the state, can look up the chapter and try contacting people there. If you want to get involved. Our local chapter is great, Santa Cruz chapter. I hope we can be back to doing in-person meetings soon.
Yeah, and that reminds me of one of my favorite parts of the local chapters meetings is the keying sessions that happen before the meeting. I love that so much. And it when you held up your big old tome of a Jepson manual, it reminded me of those days. And yeah, I think that will be a fun training for us to do in the future, is like a keying session for those of you who are brave enough to dive into that. I think we should try to make something like that happen. And let us know if you have any other questions. I'm going to take a moment to just share that I will be sending up a follow-up email with a survey link. And I really hope that you guys will just take a moment to fill that out for us. It will really help. This is a brand new initiative and series. And so we're very interested to hear what would be most useful to you. And again, the hope is that you go through this process and begin to feel really, really connected to fire ecology in the region, and that you build your understanding so that you can continue to make just these really meaningful observations that, again, we don't know all of the ways that they'll be utilized in the future. We do have one of our partners, the Kenneth S. Norris Center for Natural History, is providing interns for this, and they're going to be doing data analysis and data visualization and pre-fire burn surveys. So there will be kind of like immediate applications, but also we got to see what we get. So we hope that you'll continue on this journey with us. But one of the ways that we'll know how to best do that is by you filling out that survey. And in that email, I'll also send a link to all of the resources that Amy has compiled for us. And again, there is still room for the April 15th in-person training at the Bonnie Doon Ecological Reserve, so you can sign up for that as well.
And I think we have a question about, we're planning for the surveys will be the same between this Saturday and the April 15th one.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
So,
and I responded to her directly.
Yeah, so we'll be able to like practice using the app, and then we'll get to see some rare plants and check out the burn area. So it'll be both the same type of training and field trip.
Yeah, it's like a second session, not a part two. Part one, second session.
Our part one filled up, so we opened another one.
Yeah, and we'll do more of those in the future, and we'll do different types of in-person trainings in the future as well. All right. Well, I think we've probably gone over long enough. And yes, Cara, that is through the Museum of Natural History. So I'll be the one sending you the email, and you can stay along with this series through us. The California Native Plant Society, as a statewide agency, is organizing their statewide project and working with chapters, and we'll work with our local chapter too. But this is kind of like a broader focus on community science. Like I said earlier, we'll also be looping in other taxa. So we're starting out with rare plants as our focus, but then we'll add on invasive plants, and we'll add on amphibians, and we'll add on mushrooms and things like that. So we'll be covering a gamut of ecological concerns. So, all right, Amy, any last words?
I think that's it. Feel free to send me an email. I think if my contact information goes out in the follow-up, I'll make sure it's in there. So if you have questions or you want to chat more, then drop me a line, and I hope that sooner rather than later we can all meet each other and hopefully do some more fun outings and trainings.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for listening and staying 30 minutes past the end time.
Yeah, I can't believe that went so much long. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm sorry, Amy.
We're just having so much fun.
It is so much fun. All right, great. Well, and we'll be seeing some of you on Saturday, masked, and it's going to be great. And we will again hopefully see you for most more programs coming up in the future. More to come. All right, have a great night.
Okay, thanks everyone.